Shabbat Shalom. Last week, as I'm sure many people here, on Monday stepped out of the building at 2 p.m. to look up at the skies and to see the solar eclipse. So we looked here in the parking lot, and everybody was here in the building, got out and shared the glasses and looked up. And of course, we didn't have the totality. We didn't drive the many hours, but it did get darker, and there was that cold wind that came up a little bit, and the light somehow felt different. The light felt gray. I didn't think about it until I was driving away and knowing how many people around the country were coming together and to see this. And as I drove away, I somehow felt the light was even more eerie than it was a few minutes before. It made me think of how not so long ago, most people seeing this rare occurrence would have run the opposite way, would have run into their homes, would have run away from trying to see. Because eclipses, and the Talmud says this, were considered to be a very bad omen of something inauspicious for humanity. Solar eclipses for humanity and lunar eclipses for the Jewish people in particular. And so, the Jewish people, we have all these blessings for natural wonders, for seeing a rainbow and its own blessing, for seeing lightning and thunder, for seeing a long-lost friend, for seeing a friend whom we find beautiful, for seeing a friend we don't find so beautiful. But there's no blessing for the eclipse. And Hindus also, they fast on eclipse days. And many spiritual teachings reflect what I hear are astrological teachings, that somehow eclipses are strange in-between periods with difficult atmospheres for the physical, spiritual beings that we are. Connecting it to our Parsha, maybe it's not so different from that kind of place we're talking about in our Parsha, of this strange skin disease, this place where physical and spiritual meet, and trying to seek it out and find out, and going to find that place where that meets purity and impurity. Right? Of course, the sun is a source of life. So when suddenly the sun is covered, people got very worried. They knew the sun was what brought life and made the plants grow and the vegetables and fruit ripen. So if God was shielding the sun, then you suddenly got worried, because the opposite was darkness, was forces you couldn't control, it was even death, which in the framework of our Parsha was considered the worst possible source of impurity. And so the way the Torah deals with all of this, and it says that there's certain diseases, again, where the spiritual component meets how it manifests in the physical. And we can understand in a mysterious world, pre-medicine, their well-being seemed to be connected through the movements of spheres and through divine choices, and everything was all tied together. And for the Jewish people, right, the waxing and waning of the moon was linked to purity and impurity and to health and to our calendar. And so when the moon was covered, not a good omen for the Jewish people. And then this purity and impurity, maybe for us in a different way, but for them became something that they were always seeking. They're always seeking to be pure, and they're always seeking to avoid being impure, because impure was, in the mystery of life, something away from harmony, away. And the worst source of impurity was death. And only one thing could cure you of the impurity of death, and those were the ashes of the red heifer, this mysterious, life-giving force. And when you were impure, this is one of the most moving moments of the Parsha, the leper has to rend his garments as if he's in mourning, and walk out of the camp saying, I am impure, and had to isolate himself or herself and be away from everybody. Impurity was only when the priest said he was or she was allowed to come back. They would shave their hair and have a ritual bath and make a sacrifice. As I often mention, made two sacrifices. One sacrifice was one bird that was killed, and then the other bird was a bird that was let loose up over the fields. And the symbol maybe for that, what it felt like to suddenly be free again, a symbol of love, expanse, as the Ishbitzer Rebbe says. And maybe yet these poles of ancient life, they knew that they were connected. There was purity here and impurity there, but somehow they're all part of the same human search for otherness and transcendence. And in fact, the two poles were so connected that when the greatest source of purity, life, came into the world, a woman who gave birth would then become impure. Or when you were creating the most powerful, life-giving purity, ashes of the red heifer, the priest who was doing it himself became impure. So there were really two sides of the same coin. And this search of humanity that we all have, the search for eternity and for God, and our desire and our search and our obsession not to feel fallen, not where we'd like to be. And this whole system of purity and impurity, the way the ancients believe in this, became so widespread, they became even out of control, as scholars said. They became obsessed with these ideas. And at the end of Second Temple times, there were ritual baths all over, so that people could go into the temple, because you could only go into the temple and meet God if you were pure. And if you were impure, you couldn't approach the temple. And the rabbis, the Essenes, the mysterious group who lived by the Dead Sea, were even more obsessed with purity and impurity. And even the early rabbis, so much of the early material was preserving these ideas about purity and impurity and how they transfer from different materials, what had to be destroyed or kept. And it got so physical and systematic that maybe it lost what it was all about, that search for the spirit underneath both of it, and bringing it into daily life. So after the destruction of the temple, most of that system no longer had a place, and so it was all about being able to enter the temple. And Jews expressed it in other ways, because it's so deeply human. 2 weeks ago, I was in France, and as I mentioned last week, I was visiting my friend, whom I've talked about before, and who entered hospice just before I went. And the hospital really struck me as going day after day after day as one of those in-between places, a palliative care unit where people come in and people go out. And yet there was also these incredible moments, and as my friend, consciousness, he was pretty much conscious and there and intact while his body was at its end. But everything there and everything everybody did to try and bring him support, spiritual, if physical was no longer so easy. And I remember there was this physical therapist who came, and he was a philosopher too. And only in France are the physical therapists also philosophers. And when he found out I was Israeli, he started to show how much he knew about Israeli Merkava tanks versus French and American tanks, and spoke about medieval history and the Normans' attack on England. And he wasn't only a physical therapist, but he also was a hypnotist. And not I'm going to make you believe you're a chicken hypnotist, but but more like meditation, bringing images to bring healing and well-being. And my friend was really eager for that. And just as he was on Shabbat, when he was allowed to come home, the last time I saw him, and he really wanted me to do the full Shabbat prayers, because he was trying to find that place of transcendence and resonance amidst all of it. So our beliefs around our world, we have so many beliefs, different traditions, different people, and different kinds of expressions of the spiritual. They change over time. And as I spoke to someone this week, they said seeing the eclipse wasn't a bad omen for them. It was a spiritual experience. It was wonderful. It was uplifting. And they change over time. We still have this need for finding wholeness and for finding new beginnings and for finding transcendence, and push away as we can darkness and death, and to look for moments even when that place they meet each other, when it's like you're looking at the eclipse and the moon is over the sun and there is that faint crescent or space all around it. You need the glasses to be able to perceive it. So my friend passed away last week, and his wife wrote to everybody on his list that he went back to the stars and he found peace. Now we're all looking for love, we're all looking for meaning, we're all looking to find a little bit of wholeness in a world that often feels broken. But somehow, to be human is to find the faith that amidst all of it, there's also the possibility, perhaps even beyond life, finding mysterious rebirth and eternity itself. Shabbat Shalom.